Hiya, I'm Anna with Always Right, and in today's video, I'm going to be going over my history as a reader. Don't worry, we're not starting with Goodnight Moon days, even though that was a bop and we all know it. No, I'm going to kind of skim over the youth. No one needs to reminisce that hard. But I am going to talk primarily about what influenced me as a reader when I was getting back into reading, as well as any books that stood out to me that just were like, hey, this is like a really good actual example of things that I always hear or you always hear as a reader, writer, whatever. So let's get into it. Back in my youth, I read a lot, which I imagine most of us did when we were the youngins. But really, I did read quite a few books when I was a kid. I especially adored Aaron Hunter. I loved all those. Loved The Guardians of Gahul or whatever, the owl one, you know, that one they made a movie of. Should have made a sequel. I loved it. And then the hormones kicked in and my little brain went, we have a new focus. So I really stopped reading until I discovered fan fiction, and then I really started reading. Because you gotta remember, I grew up during Quizilla days when actually people would post stories onto Quizilla, like their little fan fictions, their Harry Potter, their Naruto fan fictions, their Bleach fan fictions would all be on Quizilla, and it was super weird because you'd have to say yes or no or gasp or something stupid. You'd click submit for the quiz, and then like the final paragraph would show up for the thing. Oh, I'm really dating myself with this. And then Wattpad came along, and thank God it did. I really got into reading fan fiction, and in turn, I really got into, yes, you guessed it, stars for you, writing fan fiction. I ended up writing fan fiction or Wattpad-esque, I guess is the polite way to say it, stories for 10 years. Like, basically from the age of like 12, 13, I really started writing fan fiction, getting into it. I didn't understand really what I was writing when I was young. Like, I would just have a paper, you know, and I would just kind of rewrite a scene. Didn't know, didn't understand. And then I found Quizilla. Like, then the rest is history. But yeah, so I wrote fan fiction basically from 12 to 13 to like 21 to 22. And you can guess what happened around the 21, 22 age range. That's right. I went to college. I was in college and I really just stopped reading for pleasure. Like fan fiction, didn't have time to read it. Even original stories on Wattpad, I would maybe have time, you know, during winter break, spring break, but usually during the semester, I didn't have time for pleasure reading, which looking back is a total lie to myself, but at the time I couldn't wrap my mind around reading on top of doing classes. And the reason I say that now, hindsight, I had a friend that read the entire Game of Thrones series like in her freshman year. I'm still struggling with book one. I'm well past freshman year. So I'm just kind of like, maybe I did have time, I just didn't have priorities for it. Life went on. I was a big adult. I had like adult jobs, accounting, run, don't do it. Did business consulting. And then around, I think it was like 2019, 2018, I kind of discovered AuthorTube. But I discovered Jenna Morrissey when I was kind of ending my career as a fan fiction person, because I did piddle with it into my 20s, past like the 21 age range I said, but it's like 12 to 20, that's all I did was I wrote fan fiction. That was my joy. And then I discovered Jenna Morrissey, and I really kind of started looking at my writing. I stopped reading pretty much when I graduated because I had a real job. And I will tell you this, if you're in college right now and you're like, oh, I'll write when I get out of college. Just know that there's like a year or two of adjusting, like mentally, physically, emotionally, once you get out of college and once you get into being a worker, you know, doing the employee stuff, being an adult, like a real adult, there is a serious transition period where it's hard to get your feet under you. I mean, not just reading will become hard, but writing is also really hard. Like any hobbies just seem impossible for the first year or two out of college when you have a full-time job. And even if you have a part-time job. A lot's changing for you. So if you're at that point in your life, breathe, just get through it. I'll see you on the other side. You can stay for the rest of the video. I'll allow it. But like I said, I found AuthorTube and Jenna Morrissey, and then I found kind of like the more lighthearted vlogging style of Kate Kavanaugh when she was like super baby channel. Watching Jenna and watching Kate really kind of rekindled my desire to write, rekindled my desire to read again. While I was watching them, I was really taking mental notes of any books they were mentioning, like The Red Queen, Holly Black, Cinder by Marissa Myers. All of these books were really popular, YA primarily books, and I was taking mental notes. I still hadn't decided at this point whether I was going to write or read or do anything. I was just kind of mind-numbingly enjoying entertainment, living vicariously through Kate and Jenna. And then February of 2020 hit, and this was before all the crazy 2020, as you know. I decided, I was like, I'm going to start reading again. I have all these recommendations that I've been kind of keeping mental tabs on, and I was like, I think I'm ready. I think I have a solid enough jumping off point of knowledge for the current books to start reading. And I know that the books I listed were barely even like current back then. 2020 came and I got my first audiobook that I purchased with my adult money, and that was Bambi. I was driving to like a college friend's wedding, and it was exactly long enough to listen to Bambi all the way through, going from my hometown where I was at to my friend's wedding. And it was awesome. It's like 4 hours, 3.5, whatever. I really kind of had a little light bulb go off in my head, and I was like, hey, if I can listen to books, that's the same as reading books. We'll get into that later. Don't you worry, child. We'll get into that soon. 2020, I went from reading maybe 1 or 2 books in 2019 to reading 29 books in 2020. Those 29 books that I read were primarily young adult books, and I just didn't have the best time with it. My selection of books was heavily influenced by what was available for free on Audible and what was available through Libby. For example, I read Bambi because it was really cheap on Audible, and then I turned around and read, like Cinder, the entire Hunger Games series, Red Queen, Glass Sword, and then the Hunter trilogy by Mercedes Lackey. All of these are basically YA books. And keep in mind, in 2020, the book I wrote was an adult contemporary fiction novel. In 2020, I read a grand total, I'm going through it, I'm looking through it right now, read a grand total of 0 contemporary adult fiction novels. The most popular kind of designation was YA fantasy novels. Here, let me count on my one hand how many of these books I physically read. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. I physically read less than 20% of those books. I read 5 out of 29. That's almost 1 out of 6 that I physically read. And then 2021 came. And 2021, if you were watching my channel back in the day, God, that's been 2 years ago. 2021, I ended up reading 66 books. I far exceeded it. And one of the reasons I read so many books in 2021, I was frantically trying to find the magic behind that recommendation, that statement of, if you want to be a better writer, read. I was frantically looking for that, but I was looking in all the wrong places. I ended up reading like 3 or 4 craft novels and just not getting much from them. This one I did. This one I liked, as you can tell by my rainbow. But for the most part, I was still playing catch up with all the book recommendations I was seeing out there. Also, total side note, 2021 began a weird tradition for me where in January of the year, without intending to, I get an audiobook from Libby and I hate it at the end of it. And then I kind of look at it, take a step back, and I go, "You're a Princess and the Pea retelling. Why are you here?" 3 years it's happened now. I didn't know they made 3 retellings of Princess and the Pea, but I found them, all 3 of them. But 2021 was the year that I really started diving a little more into adult fiction. Despite the Princess and the Pea book, I was still reading heavily recommended books like The Truth Witch and From Blood and Ash, Shadow and Bone. Basically, I was still reading young adult fantasy novels that were being recommended by the author tubers I was watching. I feel like in 2021, I started to realize that young adult is not my favorite. New adult, like it, that's fine. Like From Blood and Ash, Guild, more grown-up books were resonating with me. And I did find quite a few adult books that I liked through the recommendations, like Priory of the Orange Tree, People We Meet on Vacation. Those are just a few examples of the adult ones that I did like, and I did kind of grow as I read them. And then 2022 happened, and in 2022, as you probably could tell, from I think the last few videos I posted, where I just was really stressed, really just, I didn't read a lot. I read 34 books. I was still, of course, I mean, there's always going to be a level of influence with your reading, because that's the nature of marketing, that's the nature of sellers. A few books that pop up just when I'm kind of scrolling is like Martha Wells' All Systems Red, which is the Murderbot series, A Court of Wings and Ruin, because I read ACOTAR earlier, The Love Hypothesis. There are quite a few influences, but I feel like I was finally working closer to what I wanted to read. I started kind of catching up, changing who I let influencing me, taking it away from people that were writing more kind of YA books, writing middle school, and going more with kind of people that were either like adults reading primarily adult fiction or people that were writing adult fiction. 2021 is also the year that I really discovered that I like shorter fantasy novels, like Spear. Another one that comes to mind that I just read is Tread of Angels. But I started looking for books. I'd learned enough from 2020 and 2021 to go into 2022 with more confidence in my reading taste. 2023 is the first year that I really feel like I'm learning myself as a reader, and I feel like I'm finally learning myself as a writer. I still have a lot of ideas for contemporary fiction. However, I do know that I love reading kind of lighter fantasy. I've taken some risks. I've bought some books that because they were beautiful and the concept sounded acceptable, didn't end up liking it as much as I was hoping. And then I've taken some major risks on some recommendations like this, The Fourth Wing, and ended up absolutely adoring it, eating it up, reading it basically in 24 hours. I have read 10 of the 19 books so far this year. And it'll end up being 10 out of 20 because I'm right at the end of an audiobook for a book club I'm part of. Reading the genre you want to write is a huge help. I kind of realized that when I was outlining for this video, I was like, wait, I was kind of practicing what I was preaching when I was doing fan fiction because I was writing fan fiction and I was reading fan fiction. So I was reading what I was writing, keeping on top of what was working and what wasn't in the fan fiction world. And I realized, especially going into 2023, the year where I plan on submitting my first book to a literary agent, that I need to step it up and I need to start really putting my mouth where my money is, or putting my money where my mouth is, and start reading newer releases in the genre I hope to release too. Also, fun fact, of the 20 books I've read this year, only 3 of them have been YA. And two of them were really, really good books, like hard-hitting, high up there for me. I'm excited for what 2023 brings for me. I'm excited what 2023 brings for you as well. I'd love to hear about it. Thank you for finally focusing. That was a hard blur. But yeah, my goal this year was 45 books. I think I'm going to well exceed that. Currently, I'm averaging 5 books a month. I'm not going to change my goal just in case things get crazy. I know a lot's about to change for me personally. I just bought another house. I'm still in like the house y'all saw last year. Still love her. I've had a few kind of run-ins where I'm like, ugh. But the new house I bought, it's a lot quieter, and it's totally getting renovated for me. Got a good deal on it. And then work's been rough. It's like, I've done a good job, and then there's elements that are making it unnecessarily stressful. And so we'll see what happens. If you are looking for some book recommendations for learning how to write better, how to be a better author, The Stars We Steal by Alexa Dunn is a really good example of an author voice, like a very strong author voice, very different author voice. Sarah J. Maas also has a really solid and recognizable author voice, but the way she writes it is very subtle. And the only reason that I recognize that Sarah J. Maas had that distinctive a voice was because it reminded me of a lot of how I would write when I was writing fan fiction. If you are looking for like short book recommendations, like Spear here, I would obviously recommend Spear. This has amazing, amazing prose in it. It makes you kind of stop and think about what you're reading. The story is fascinating. The way it's written is fascinating. I plan on reading it one more time this year. I just finished it, I think, in June of last year, and still pops into my mind. Another really good one is A Children's Bible by Lydia Millette. The way that she handles the prose, the way that she continues the story forward is fascinating. That's it. A lot of the other kind of shorter ones that I read, like Hollow that I'm reading right now, it's a little too weird for me to recommend, but Spear and The Children's Bible are not too weird that you're gonna be like, what the heck did you just recommend to me, Anna? Memoirs of a Geisha. Amazing prose, amazing metaphors throughout it. It's a great kind of new, fresh look on the world. Very sad story, very good story. World building, Star Eater was very, very interesting. It's not everyone's cup of tea because literally the simplest way I can pitch this book is that there are cannibalistic nuns that are keeping an island afloat over a sea of zombies that they created. No, that's actually what the story is. I think about this book and I wish it was another 100 pages longer. I just love the world building in it, and there's a lot of unique elements in it, especially the way they're thrown together. Characters aren't that great in it, but the world is fascinating. Okay, what else? I'm doing okay. I still have Hera. She is with my parents right now, chilling. Still have my job. Not much else has changed. I had a hard transition in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, if I'm being honest with you, with my job, because it's not consistent, to put it mildly. It has a lot of ups and downs, and it's been really hard for me to adjust to it, but thanks to a lot of my recent reading, I have a lot of story ideas. I have a lot of determination to finish first and second drafts, so I'm going to do it. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for liking and subscribing. And thanks for checking in on me. I hope y'all are doing as well as I am, or hopefully better. Hope to see y'all in the next one. Bye. And the next one, I don't know when that's going to be. I know I have some book ideas. If you're wondering why I'm recording here and not at my usual table or, with the books around me or anything, it's because I'm recording on my computer because I totally misplaced my actual camera, like the battery charger for it. So, yeah, I had to do it here. It's on order. It'll be here Saturday, I think it's supposed to, but I said I want to get this book out, mainly because I wanted to be like, look, I got a book. I am proud of this. Okay, bye.